What if you could leverage the suction function of the flex tail and you 3D print a little adapter that turns it into a tiny little mini vacuum? What if there was a shock absorber that when it goes down, you're actually generating a tiny amount of electricity that then gets fed into the, a little battery that's stored in the trekking pole itself. During this trip, I have been thinking about every single gear pain point, things that can be improved. Some of them are super simple that maybe even can have some DIY solutions or some 3D printed solutions, my specialty, right? Others are more off the wall, crazy ideas. I literally just came up with pain points and then some simple solutions and some wild solutions. Some of these are very feasible, others are not, but that wasn't really part of my constraints. I have an entire list right here on my iPhone. Keep in mind, don't jump all over me if it's something that's not possible. This is just a creative brainstorming exercise. I've broken these little improvements down into 5 categories. The hiking category, the tent category, and that was a big one. The water collection category, the gear category, and then the general around camp category. All right, so jumping in on the hiking category. Just in the last year or really 6 months, there's been a huge increase in capabilities of things like Claude Code. Chat GPT and OpenAI has this codex ability now to where we can do what's called vibe coding. Okay, and if you're not familiar, vibe coding is kind of like coding together and doing programming for websites and apps and technology that might not have been possible previously because the person doing the vibe coding didn't have the experience. Well, now these tools have kind of like opened up the possibility of being able to code things together. But it's good for like proof of concept and like mocking up ideas. And who knows, in the next year or two, it might be to where you can actually push some of this code out and develop some of these ideas. So my first idea is a phone app that shows your progress in some untraditional way, the progress of your hike. So let me just talk about the problem for a second. When you're backpacking, me at least, maybe not you, but me, I bring out my phone at least a dozen times during the hike, and I turn it on, I open far out, and I check the progress to see, how far I've gone, where are the water sources, how far is my shelter or campsite ahead. And I was wondering if there's a way that you could eliminate that. Along your trekking pole, maybe you have like a series of 10 LEDs, okay? And each one illuminates green after you've passed. It's kind of like a progress bar. So 10 would be 100% of your hike. And then one LED lit up would be, 10% of your hike. So you can kind of visually see, almost like one of those things in the airplane, when you're going along and you can kind of like see the progress of the trip. Something like that. But then let me throw something else out there. Maybe you have like a blue dot that shows where your water source is. Or, another color for an overlook or something. You can kind of see along the progress where those things would be. I don't know, I'm just throwing this out here. Remember, a lot of this stuff is wild. This is not fleshed out. These are just crazy ideas. Could be impossible to do this. Okay, another idea. I am always worried about my key on the trail, okay? As a matter of fact, as I say this, I get the instinct to check my pocket where I keep my key. And I'm actually stopping to do this right now. And thankfully I do have the key. But I get this instinct to check for the key all the time, and I'm sure you guys do too. But what if there was like a little dot, a red dot that appears on your smartphone or on some wearable tech that illuminates when you definitely have your key nearby. And if that red light is not illuminated, that means your key is not there. So it's almost like a very quick visual check to make sure that your key is there. I was telling this to my hiking buddy who's a bit behind me, and he was like, yeah, the Apple AirTag will do that, and it'll kind of like tell you when you've left something behind. But the problem with the Apple AirTag, in my opinion, is that it's too heavy. So I want something that's a little bit, you know, maybe lighter, or maybe it's some analog solution. Like maybe you have 2 contacts of metal that go around the key, and as soon as you take the key out of that, it knows to you know, send a warning, something like that. I don't know, guys. I'm seriously just kind of like brainstorming off the top of my head right now. But that's something you could do. So some visual indicator. Is it on your trekking pole? Is it on your, somewhere on your backpack? A little LED that lights up. And then you know you have your key. I don't know. You could also just check for your key, and that's fine too. Remember, these are kind of off the wall ideas, a lot of these. Some of them are more practical, but that one's more off the wall. Okay, the other one, and this one's pretty cool. Charging. So charging stuff and power on the trail is always a problem. And, you know, we have to carry these USB style power banks. And those are great, and that's a huge, you know, technology boost right there, and we didn't have that long ago. So that's great. But, you know, one time I saw a story about over in Japan, I think it was, they're using rumble stripes on the road to generate electricity. So that got me thinking, on the hike yesterday, when you hike, and you have your trekking poles and you're pushing your trekking pole down into the ground, what if there was a tiny, like almost like a little shock absorber that when it goes down, you're actually generating a tiny amount of electricity that then gets fed into the, you know, a little battery that's stored in the trekking pole itself. Again, I don't know the feasibility of something like this, but I do know something. My kids have a little emergency flashlight, and you kind of crank this wheel and then the light lights up. And it doesn't really take much of a crank for it to light up. So, you know, if you're hiking, let's say 15 miles, 20 miles, that's a lot of, you know, each time your trekking pole hits the ground and it generates a tiny amount of electricity, gets fed into that battery. At the end of a 15-mile hike, you've got quite, you know, maybe enough energy to charge your iPhone or charge your camera or some other device. I don't know. Again, so that's something to think of. All right, let me go back to my list. Okay, on the topic of trekking poles. So with the trekking poles, it's hard for me to show this as I'm walking and talking right now, but with the trekking poles, a lot of times you're trekking like, you know, with one trekking pole in one hand, the other trekking pole in the other. But sometimes I like to only use one trekking pole. It would be cool if they made a grip that kind of like snaps together, and hopefully I can put some B-roll here to explain what I'm talking about. But the grip would kind of snap together and form one grip that would allow everything to line up at the top and the bottom, snap together, maybe using like very small magnets or something like that, or even some form-fitting joint, and everything moves together, and you've got one trekking pole that you could instantly separate for when you need two. Okay, because it's kind of a pain to put one in your backpack and, you know, get it out when you need it. So if you could kind of just slap those together and then pull them apart when you need to, I think that would be cool. And I don't think it would affect the ergonomics of each individual grip by designing maybe like a flat spot that they could both be pushed together really quick, forming one trekking pole. So another thing, this is a small one and also something you could probably DIY. On trekking poles, would it be too hard for them to add a tiny 1/8 inch female thread for a camera attachment for a little monopod? To me, it seems something so simple. You could even do plastic threads if you wanted to, you know, save a little bit of weight. But to me, something like that would be a very easy, simple thing to do that would add a little bit of functionality. A while ago, I designed and 3D printed like a mount for 1/8 inch threads for cameras that went on the end of my trekking pole, and it actually worked out pretty well. But I don't know, I just feel like that's something that these trekking pole companies should consider adding on. Maybe even have like a little plastic cover that covers the threads when you're not using it. How much weight could that add? Maybe you only do it for one pole, not the other. And it just gives you, for the photographers out there and the videographers, it just gives you a little bit more flexibility and dual use. Sorry guys, walking uphill here. All right, let's move on to the tent. So I definitely have to show B-roll here, but in your tent, you know, I have this like vestibule table that I made out of Tyvek that I always bring with me, and I put on my on the ground in the vestibule. Also, I unload everything out of my backpack onto that. It's bright. It makes it easy to spot gear, and you know, you don't lose stuff. Plus, you also keep stuff off the ground. It doesn't get muddy and stuff like that if it's wet. And that's great, but the problem I have in the vestibule is stuff ends up sliding off of it. Tyvek is super slippery. So I thought one idea would be simply adding a little lip onto the edge of, you know, all four edges of the table. And this is a simple sewing technique. And it would still weigh the same. It would collapse the same. I guess you'd lose, you know, an inch of space on each side. But to me, that would be something easy to DIY. And I actually, if anyone's interested, I would probably be able to put together a little tutorial on how to do that with your home sewing machine. Okay, so that's a tent one. Let's go back to the list. I don't know what the solution for this one is, and I'm sure many people have thought about it, but you got your zipper for the fly on your Durston tent. I've got a Durston 1P that I love, but you got that the zipper for your vestibule, you know, for the outer tent. When you're zipping it up at the end of the night, you're about ready to go to bed, you have to lean all the way out there. Like, you know, it's got, the tent has such good vestibule space, which is a pro, but the con is you have to lean so far to be able to close it. And I don't know what solution it would be, but something that you could close that without having to lean so far out. I've thought about it. I've kind of visualized it in my head over and over. I can't come up with any solution. So if you guys know of anything or have any ideas, please leave some comments below. Maybe it's, I don't know, something that attaches to a little rod that you use for something else. It couldn't be your trekking poles because you're using your trekking poles to hold up the tent. Maybe it's like a little cord that's like rigged up in a way that you pull on it and it pulls down on the zipper in another direction. I don't know, but there's got to be a solution for that. It is a pain point. And if I'm experiencing that, there's a really good chance that others are experiencing it as well. All right. Oh, here's the problem. You will all relate with this. Nowadays, we all bring our smartphones on the trail for better or worse. And at the end of the night, sometimes I enjoy, downloading like a Netflix documentary or something like that and watching the documentary in my tent. Well, you guys can probably all relate, but it's such a pain to hold the phone. So some sort of a phone holder. Now, the reason I think it's unsolvable is, number one, it needs to be very lightweight, okay? And number two, it needs to work on a bunch of different tents. Everyone has different tents, and it's such a tough problem. Believe me, I've thought about it. I've tried to design different things. I've 3D printed things many times trying to solve this problem, and I can't get it. Sometimes I'll fix it for a particular tent. I actually made something that I rigged up for my Big Agnes copper spur tent. It worked pretty well, but that was, very specific case use, and I think it'd be hard to replicate it over a bunch of different tents. So think about that. That's gonna be a continued problem. My buddy had the idea that when phones have hologram images, kind of like a projection hologram, what you could do is lay the phone on your chest when you're laying in bed, and then the hologram would just appear, and you'd be watching the content like that. Now, when that happens, then we've definitely solved the problem. But until then, I don't know what the solution is. So any ideas, please let me know. All right, get my phone out here. Oh, okay. It's another interesting one. Guys out there, calling all the guys. When we have to use the bathroom at night, there's a couple of options. So we can either go outside the tent, which is what a lot of people do, or you can have a little jar, or I use my Sawyer water bag that it came with that I don't really trust using it for actual water, so I turned it into a little pee bag, and that works pretty well. But the problem is, depending on how you do it, you definitely don't want to misfire, right? You definitely don't want to have an accident where you're misfiring in your tent. That would be terrible. So, I know there's some tools and devices out there that makes it easier for women to urinate out on the trail. I'm wondering what we could do for the guys, if there's anything that would make it easier to prevent a misfire when you're in the tent and you're having to use the bathroom. I don't know. I've thought about it. I have some ideas, but I haven't tested anything. But I do think it's in a ripe area for some kind of solution. And I do think you could do some kind of an ultralight, very minimalistic solution that would help. So think about that. You see. One I thought of this morning as I was packing up. So we all have these flex tail pumps now, which are great. If you don't have a flex tail pump. It's a little pad inflator, and it weighs less than the little inflation pack, air pack that you get with these air mattresses. And it's just amazing because it just works. It inflates the pad in like a minute, and really awesome. I love the FlexTail. But when you're packing up camp, look down at the floor of your tent and you'll see that there's a bunch of debris. There's little twigs and pieces of dirt and stuff like that. Now on a trekking pole tent, it's really tough to get that out, because on a normal freestanding tent, you would just pick the tent up and just kind of like shake it out. But you can't really do that with a trekking pole tent. It's harder to do that. So what if you could leverage the suction function of the FlexTail and you 3D print a little adapter that turns it into a tiny little mini vacuum? Okay, so we already have suction, and we have a way to attach something, maybe it's a TPU something, to the actual FlexTail, and you could turn it into a tiny little vacuum. Again, you want to avoid over engineering things and like creating new problems with these solutions. Is this going to work? I don't know. Probably not. Is it worth experimenting with? Yeah, absolutely. I love sketching stuff up. I love making prototypes. I love testing. So yeah, I probably will. Will it lead to anything? 10-20% chance. Maybe 30%. But I'll test it. I'll try it. Anyway, another way is just to I used to tell people just to get a paper towel, you wet that, and then you clean it out. But, you know, who's bringing paper towels on backpacking trips? I'm not. So you don't really have a lot of paper towels just laying around to clean up the inside of a tent. Anyway, again, like I said, some of these ideas are kind of wild. All right, moving on. Water collection. You are filling up water at a spring, okay? And the biggest pain point in filling up the water bottle, so you fill up your dirty water pouch. I use the Canuck 2-liter water bag. You fill that up, and then you attach your filter. I use the Sawyer Squeeze, and then you spray. You put pressure on the water bag, and you squirt essentially the water into the clean water bag. You push it out and it comes out into the clean water bag. That's always a huge pain. And if you're a Sawyer user, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's tough to get the tip of the water filter lined up exactly with your water container, clean water container. Either the clean water container is tipping over, or, because when there's not a lot of water in there, it's really easy to, tip the thing over. There's no water weight, or you're misfiring and there's water getting all over the, it's missing the container, and you're essentially wasting energy from having collected that water. It's just spraying all over the ground. So I don't know what it would be, but something that would kind of hold that a little bit better in place. I know they make the blue female to female threads that's designed for the gravity setup, where you kind of like hang everything and it slowly filters. I don't really like doing that because I think it's too slow. I just squirt it through. But something with aiming that water and making sure that it gets in the clean water bag would be preferable for me, and something that I might try and mock up. So anyway, leave your thoughts. All right, just a couple more things. You know, going back to this idea of vibe coding. So using like Claude Code, what about an app where you take a picture of all your gear that's laid out on the ground, you know, maybe in your living room or something before a trip, and it's gonna go and it will go through and look at all of your items, and then it'll make a suggested gear list based on things like weather in your area that you're going, maybe even like ticks. You know, is there going to be a lot of ticks or not? You could do, I don't know, bugs, and it would include stuff like bug spray. And, you know, that would at least give you like a base of what to pack. And I think that could be handy. You know, I have a checklist of gear, and I'm always kind of like going back and forth with different things, switching out particular pieces of gear. But I think it would be an interesting test, especially for the vibe coding stuff, to see if you could put something together and what that would look like, what it would do, and how it would perform. It might be pretty interesting. It might be surprised. And then along the same lines, you could also do the same thing with food. Okay, so maybe you take a picture of all the food that you've got for the trip, and then you have it, arrange it in, you know, order for you for each day. And perhaps it could even like make an image of what you're supposed to eat that day. Because the problem I have oftentimes with food is I organize it by day before I leave on my kitchen table, but then it just all goes into one bag. And at the end of day one, I don't know what was allotted to eat that day, or if it was allotted for the next day. So maybe some kind of solution there would be good. All right, let me pull my notes up here. And then last, this one's kind of a fun one, good one to end on. I think there's a lot of ripe opportunity for gaming and entertainment at camp. So what about an ultralight game? And, you know, I don't know exactly what it would be, obviously, but I was thinking, what if you use material for the game that you might end up using, you know, on a backpacking trip? So for instance, it could be like a length of paracord that could be used on an emergency basis, or the pieces could be multi-use, something that you might need on a trip. I'm thinking like, you know, first aid stuff or safety stuff or cord or something like that, where you don't necessarily need it every trip, but you always have it just in case. So if you have some dual use there, some game or something like that, that you could play, you know, at camp, might be kind of nice. So that's it. That's what I got. Think about those things. Hopefully some of it was, you know, interesting, and some out of all this, at least maybe some of it has some potential. But that's kind of like, this is my process. So I'm always thinking about, what can you do to improve things? What are the pain points? What are the little problems that you can solve on trail to make your experience funner, you know, more convenient and more satisfying, easier, all that. I start by looking at the pain points. A lot of people do that. Yeah, so if you've gotten all the way to the end, thank you very much. I am headed to probably like 12 miles today, so I'm just starting out the day. So thanks for being with me for the first part of my day, and hopefully I can clip to some scenery from this section too. All right guys, I'll see you out there.